Hey, what's up, Trash Talkers? What's up, Gruntworks? Here we are with the fifth principle of patrolling. For those of you who don't understand what that is, years ago, back in the day, when Ranger School was a combat school and not a leadership school, they graded you based off of these principles. Didn't depend really how the raid went, how the ambush went. It was, did you follow these 5 principles? And a lot of people just failed on the last one. Common sense, right? Like when the RI goes, Ranger, what were you doing? Right? Like, you know, it might not be a bad thing. He's just asking, like, what were you thinking? Because, you know, maybe it just didn't go the way you thought it would, but you had some common sense. But most of the time when he's asking you, what were you doing? It's because some stupid shit happened. And he just, he wants to find out if it was you or if it was the guy he needs to go spot report over there for doing the bayonet charge, you know, like whatever that was. But with us today, we have a very special guest. We have we haven't coined this term yet, but you know, we've done it before. It's the VTT's heartthrob. All right, Jason Glick. Now,
I thought you were talking about me. My bad.
No, definitely not. As far as all the feedback I've gotten, there have been a few people, buddy, that have talked about your looks, but not usually the females and not usually in a good way. But
well, I'm not gonna lie, I do have a certain je ne quoi, you know what I'm saying? Like je ne sais quoi. That's right.
You just got corrected by your 18 Bravo.
I have an interpreter with me. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, we record this once a month, and it's just fitting that Buddy is not, you know, he's in a car. You know, so it's like the one time a month that we record it, there he is in the car. But either way, we got JC Glick. He's a real famous guy, and I mean, I don't know if you ever go like on Twitter or LinkedIn, all these places, but he's like a TED talker. He works for all these other companies. He's been on the Veteran Trash Talk Hour, which is more than enough, right? That's pretty much like
absolutely
the stamp of honor. You know, like you've made it, hang it up, you know,
kind of the goal, right? I mean, what's after that?
So what we wanted to talk about today, and again, the whole point of the fifth principle is we're going to talk about some stuff, whether it's military or not, political or not. But we're not saying that it's wrong. We're just saying it doesn't pass the fifth principle. And it's going to raise an eyebrow to the RI, right? The RI is going to be like, I'm gonna have to ask you what you're doing, all right? Because it doesn't make any sense right now. All right, maybe it does. So that's why we ask anybody listening, if you have an answer to what we're talking about, if you can come on and either prove us wrong, explain it, or agree and reinforce, whatever. We're all about that. Okay, we're not, like I said, we're not saying you're wrong. When we brought up the show about the anti-vaxxers and the vaccines, like we're not like Dr. Fauci, all that stuff. Nobody really came on. We did get Dr. Tony Brooks on to come on last week and say that men cannot have babies. So we had to get an actual doctor on here to validate what we thought didn't make sense. We didn't think that a man could have a baby. So JC, for those that haven't seen you on the Trash Talk Hour or follow you, give us a quick rundown on where you're coming from and what you did in the military, if you don't mind.
You know, really lucky to have served 20 years, retired in 2015, spent most of that time with Rangers or with the Asymmetric Warfare Group. I've been out, you know what, it'll be 6 years now. Did what all special operations guys need to do, you know, wrote a couple of books, you know, you check that off and you do some speaking engagements and work with some teams and stuff like that. And, you know, really, most recently, what I've been really focused on is trying to stem veteran suicide. And, you know, 11 combat tours, but 4 suicide attempts. And it's so important to me that we do something about this. And as we come out of the 20-year war, there's 2 things that I'm most worried about is how do we make sure that veteran suicide numbers start to change? And how do we make sure that our combat warriors transition effectively into the civilian world in a meaningful way? They're not like the disgruntled vet. They're building the country just like they did after World War II.
Right. And again, you can find them on social media anywhere. JC Glick, look him up. Buddy's phone just lost service, but that's okay. We're not live.
We're good.
So
We're
Chris,
good. Chris, get a call.
Yeah, Chris, the Muffin Fingers, the baker, he is not with us today. Otherwise, he'd be losing his shit that you're on a phone. But it's okay. So we brought in JC because he was an officer in the United States military, in the Army, and he was a Ranger. So he understands the 5 principles of patrolling. He understands what it is he expected from an NCO. So here's where what we're gonna talk about today. I know Buddy's chomping at the bit, but growing up throughout the military, and I hit 18 years, Buddy's got over 20, JC did over 20. You've heard the term NCO business. And I always wondered what that meant, because there isn't any doctrinal term for it, of like what NCO business is. However, there is doctrine on what is expected of a non-commissioned officer. There is doctrine that is, when you get up to, we're not going to talk about sergeant majors because, they don't really have jobs. But like what we're going to talk about is like the first sergeant, which is what I want to start off with. So when you have an infantry company, the first sergeant's job by doctrine is to be the senior tactical advisor to the commander. All right, the company commander. He's also supposed to be the senior trainer for the company. All right, so he's the one that looks at the training plans. When the young lieutenant comes in and the platoon sergeant comes in with a training plan for the week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. All right, they look at it and they go, don't go in that captain's office with that. Don't go in that captain's office with that. You go in there with that. You go in there with that, and you'll be okay. All right, and then platoon sergeant, you stay. Lieutenant, go. I got to talk to the platoon sergeant now, right, and do those things. So I guess we'll let Buddy start with it because I know he's got stuff to do tonight. But let's just start off with the negativity. Let's get negative right away. This is a little different than my usual. I'm a positive guy. Let's get negative. What has happened? What has happened to the non-commissioned officer corps, Buddy Beckwith?
All right, from my perspective, and I don't know a whole lot. I only did my 24 years as an enlisted guy, so I didn't see a whole lot. But when we started referring to NCOs, especially senior NCOs, as advisors, that was the minute that we fucked up. And here's why. NCOs, especially senior NCOs, are so worried about making their next berth or their next rank or their next whatever, they forget the reason why they're NCOs. And we're NCOs because we are advisors, but you can't advise the captain, you can't advise the colonel, you can't advise the general if you're sitting beside him at every fucking meeting that guy goes to. There's never been a fucking decision made in the Army, ever. Not a single one. Never has an officer ever made a decision at a meeting. Never. Not a single time. George Washington didn't make a decision at a meeting. Patton didn't make a fucking decision at a meeting. Freaking meeting with every time the colonel goes. Why does the first sergeant have to go to every meeting with the captain? You don't have to hold his hand. The second thing that fucked us up was the internet, because we spent so much time behind our computers checking emails and making sure that we are appraised the word or
JC, is he coming in choppy on your end?
or
Yes.
Yeah, dang it. I'm sure that would have been gold if it came in.
Am I still coming in choppy? Are we good? Can we just start
over?
No,
you're actually going real fast, like Alvin. So.
Anywho, is it still jacked up or what?
No.
Okay. Anyway, to caveat that instead of being there with the colonel during his meeting, Remember when you first joined the Army and the sergeant major would pop up randomly when you were cleaning your weapon and ask you what the max effective range of your weapon was? And if you didn't know the answer, he would go get your team leader and ask why you didn't know the answer. You remember when the sergeant major also got that time to ask you how you were doing and how your family was doing and whether you had pay issues or anything else? And he knew who you were, and he was a battalion sergeant major of, 500-600 dudes. I just left a 5th group, and there are sergeant majors in 5th group that are company sergeant majors that don't know the people in their company. There's only 75 of them or so, and they don't know who those people are because they're so busy behind their computer checking emails that they don't know who the people are. I used to tell my team leader, because we had counseling when the team leader got there, and he would tell me what he expected of me and this, that, and the other. And I used to ask him if he had watched Days of Thunder, and he would be like, "What?" And I was like, "I need you to go watch Days of Thunder. We'll talk about it tomorrow." He would go watch it and come back the next day, and I'd be like, "All right, here's the deal. The team is the race car. You're the fucking driver, and I'm the crew chief. I don't need you to run it. Don't slam on the gas. Don't slam on the brake. Don't run it into the fucking wall. Don't break the team. I'm going to make sure that you have the best race car you can get. Your job is to win the fucking race. Your job is to sell the team, and I'm going to make sure you have a product that's worth selling." And when it came to leadership business and NCO business, there is NCO business. What the guys are doing, what the guys are training is NCO business. What we need to be doing is officer business. What next mission, what the freaking national friggin'
Strategic level.
Freaking shit, that's officer
Because we can
business.
pronounce it. It's because we can pronounce it.
At the end of the day, but at the end of the day, when we talk, because we're doing our own little me and him closeout, that's leader business. That's when we discuss things when we get on the same sheet of music. But we don't need to be on the same sheet of music all day long. We need to be on the same sheet of music once a day. That way we know where we're trying to take this team that we're working with to get there. But we got so wrapped around, everybody wants to do everybody else's job, but they can't do their own fucking job. Like, if you can't be a good officer, how the fuck are you going to be so you want to jump over and tell me how to be a good NCO? And how am I going to be a good NCO if I'm too worried about telling some lieutenant that he's a piece of shit because he's just a lieutenant? My job is, shitty captains are made by shitty E7s because they get to their first platoon. They don't trust their fucking platoon sergeant because he tells them to sit in the corner and shut up. And then they become captains who don't trust their first sergeant or their platoon sergeant. So we've all got kind of a role to play in this whole leader business thing. But at the end of the day, everybody trying to be the leader is not how this works. Last thing. When we decided to get promoted to E8 or E9, you needed a bachelor or a master's degree. Here's my question. If I got a master's degree, I've been deployed 7 times. I've been to Ranger School, Pathfinder School, Halo School, Dive School,
Jedi Master School.
And I'm working with a colonel who's got a master's degree or is working on a doctorate, and he's been deployed twice and has been to Ranger School. Why the fuck am I working for you? You should be working for me at this point. I've got the same amount of education.
No, yeah, you
more schools and more experience.
Yeah, you've hit on some points that I was going to talk about as well. Now, before I turn it over to JC with his experiences in the military and his strengths and all that stuff of what he's seen or weaknesses in his opinion. Again, like you said, when you have a shitty captain, it's because he had a crappy E7. And that's not necessarily always true, because again, when you have these lieutenants come into his office and pitch their plans or whatever, right? And that captain says, "Did you talk to the first sergeant?" And they said, "Yeah." Right. And then he looks at the plan and goes, "Really? All right. So now this shitty first sergeant now is making the captain have to work harder because this first sergeant, even with a bachelor's degree, right, doesn't have the technical and tactical knowledge that he's supposed to have
Well,
as a
Nick,
first sergeant.
why would he not have the technical and tactical knowledge that he needs to
Because
have?
what I'll get into this after I turn. I'll
get a bachelor's degree instead of doing what he was supposed to be doing.
Correct. That's what I was going to get into. It's where when you look at right off the Army's page of the NCO 2020, all right, the new thing that I actually watched the guys who built it. Now I have a lot of respect for a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. And you know, as they were talking about it, like here's what their talking points were: the future of the Army, the expert action badge. All right, the new PT test, character development, not in my squad, improving written and oral communication skills, professional military education, unit non-commissioned officer development program, the year of the NCO. All right, like, all right, so what are we doing with that? And I know you can dig into all that kind of stuff and get
What do any of those things have to do with close with, fix, find, and destroy the enemy?
I was just thinking exactly the same thing. I didn't hear anything about warfighting in there.
Now there is some, obviously, like in character development, you know, you can spin that off a little bit. The expert action badge, you can spin that off a little bit. You know, you can make it sexy.
That's task, and that's being moral and ethical. That has nothing to do. Those are things that you need to do well in combat. But where's shoot, move? Okay, we got move because we got the PT. I'm cool with that. Communicate. All right, but where's the shoot? Where's the stuff that talks about the profession of arms?
Right.
Where's the patrol base?
And where's the staff sergeant? Where's the staff sergeant that knows how to use every weapon in the platoon?
Yeah, exactly.
And he knows every range system of every weapon. He knows so that when the PL's planning, he can be like, can't put the guns there. And he's gonna be like, why? Because at a 3 meter, you know, increase, at a 3 meter, it's only gonna fire 600 meters before that bullet hits the ground. Right?
Can I jump in?
Now it's yours. Now it's yours. Like, so
I just want to jump in. I want us to all talk because but I want to read you something first. And first, shameless plug for my first book. But I want to read you the dedication, the first line, the first part of the dedication. This book is dedicated to every non-commissioned officer I've ever served with in my time in service. You are the ones that demonstrated exemplary leadership. You are able to manage the unique challenge of leading subordinates, peers, and superiors every day, and you do it with an ease and ability that is inspiring. You are the example of leadership. I meant that. I learned. Now I don't. So, buddy, I don't agree with everything you said, but I agree with 90% of it. And I'll tell you why I don't agree with the other 10% is some of us, we're not very smart and we're shitty officers. Okay. So I'm going to tell you that I only saw leader business. And the first thing I did whenever I came into a platoon, a company, my battalion, I grabbed my NCO counterpart, my NCO Ranger buddy, and I said, this is ours. It's not mine. It's ours. So that guidon doesn't represent me. It represents us. You, me, this is ours. We get to lead this together. If you see something, you fix it. I don't care if somebody says, well, that's officer business. No, it's not. Fix it. If you see my sergeant majors, like, hey, if you see something jacked up and you see one of my captains being an idiot, yeah, fix them. Because I'm going to fix one of your NCOs who's an idiot. I mean, we're going to lead this thing together, right? And I will say, I think that's the only 10% is we were together a lot because, quite honestly, like I loved every NCO. My platoon sergeants were amazing. My first sergeants were amazing. My troop sergeant majors were amazing. My battalion command sergeant majors were amazing. I wanted to be with those dudes all the freaking time because I got better. Now, it bothers me what I hear. I can just speak from my example, from what I've gotten to experience, right? And the NCOs from team leaders on up, like Again, never had a bad one. Like every NCO I've had, like, did they make mistakes? Did they screw up? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But they were focused on making the boys better. They were focused on making themselves better. They were all in about the organization. And I'm not lying. I learned how to be a leader from watching NCOs, because the difference between officers and NCOs, the real world is, look, we lead down for sure. Sometimes we get to lead up if we have a good commander, but we never lead peer to peer. We never do it. We don't do it. Even the people that we love, we're in competition with all the time.
Yep.
So we don't lead side to side. But NCOs do it seamlessly. They do it all the time. They're leading each other. I'd have a squad leader who'd be leading other squad leaders, and team leaders be leading other team leaders. And they could do it because that's the beauty of what NCOs get to do. Now, do I care? I don't care if an officer has a degree. Like, I think degrees as a measure of success are not the measure of success, right? I certainly look at, I mean, honestly, I get a master's degree, and my 11 combat tours are a whole lot more impressive to me than my master's degree. That was never, I don't look at that. That's a capability focused thing, not a capacity focused thing. How does that individual solve unknown problems? If you get a bachelor's degree or master's degree, you've just told me that you can solve problems that have been problems and solutions for eons. Like, that's what we teach in college.
Well, the big problem, first thing, when I say that there's NCO business and officer business, that doesn't mean on the spot corrections are not everybody's business, right? What I'm saying is there are things that an NCO should spend 80% of his time on, and an officer should spend 20% of his time on, and those things are flip-flop. And at the end of the day, we come together and we discuss them, and they're everybody's business because they are us. Like we're all.
I might go 60-40, but I'm with you. Yeah. And again, it's because I don't know that I'm.
But
I always brought NCOs into whatever I was doing, because I know I didn't get it right.
Right. And then as far as the degree thing goes, now there are some guys that already had a bachelor when they came in to the Army. As far as officers go, degree completion is built into your pipeline anyway. That's just a thing that you do. But as far as NCOs go, we've made it a huge requirement to become a senior non-commissioned officer to have those degrees. But what we haven't articulated is what those degrees are in. First of all, like, your master's degree in general education is just as good as some dude that came into the Army with a bachelor's degrees in friggin' explosive engineering. You know what I mean? Right. So those things need to be taken into account anyway. But when you make having a master's degree a giant thing that you're looking at, a qualifier for sergeant major, I know guys that I know some really good guys that have master's degrees that are master sergeants and sergeant majors. I do. But more than that, if I meet an E8 that has a master's degree, more often than not, that guy has no idea how to do his actual job, because he spent all of his time working on doing a master's degree so that he can get promoted, right, as opposed to doing his job and doing his job well so that he can get promoted.
Now here's where when I try to have this discussion, and like, obviously we'll have a better one than some that I've sat in the rooms with and try to talk about this with some senior leaders and stuff like that, is you got to avoid the bias of where getting any type of education is a good thing. All right. So we definitely don't want to say, hey, don't go do that. All right. We don't want to say, hey, there isn't some place where we can teach these young guys to, how to actually, write in the right way, so that, in the event that, when they get out of the Army, or whatever. Okay. And this is where at the end of the show, I was going to get into like, cause you know, a good NCO when he bitches has a solution, right? So like that, the solution to some of these issues I have, I think, but like you said, buddy, and I really didn't care about your master's degree, even though I'm getting one now or whatever, but like, you know, it's just I have
I
time.
think there's a happy medium. You can't make a bachelor's or a master's this giant criteria because that diminishes every other criteria. We need guys that have bachelor's degrees. We need guys that have master's degrees.
We need smart
right?
people.
But we need smart people that
and educated people
can be taken on a full spectrum of things. You know what I mean? The Air Force has tests. Look, why don't we just take a test?
That's one of my solutions to like the E6 board, right? Is where you get tested on every weapon system in a platoon, right? And you pass every weapon system on a platoon, written and hands-on, just like Ranger stakes, right? Like you pass all these things, and it's like, okay, he knows how a 320 works. He knows how the 240 works. He knows the distances. He knows the range cards. Yeah, whatever. All right, and that all should be.
That a test for E5s. For E6s, I would say, hey, here's a squad. Put them into a cigar-shaped perimeter, or here's a platoon. Go get a patrol started.
And one of my favorite Ranger buddies, Sergeant Major. He's now Sergeant Major King, but he. You know, when they did the first Master Leadership Program MLC class, and they did a pilot, and they sent a bunch of RIs and regiment guys to it, and they came back, and the report got done, and this guy was real quiet, dude, from Mississippi, right? Big Southern accent, like never said a word, right? And all of a sudden you're, oh, what the fuck? And I was like, and he swore. I was like, King, you okay? And he's like, you read this bullshit? And I was like, no. And he's like, they want me to write at an APA level. They said that I should probably take some college courses before I go to this. And this is 11 Charlie, you know, and he's like, I hang fucking mortar rounds. Raj, you understand? And he's like, and I dig mortar pits. And he's like, and I can put together a plotting board in like 5 seconds. He's like, that's what I do. And he's like, if you want me to be as educated as a major, like you were talking about earlier, you want me to be as educated as a major, then you're going to pay me as a fucking major. Right. Like I was like, damn, King, you haven't said shit like in 2 years. That was actually like, wow. Okay. like cool. But no, like JC said, he brought his NCOs in. And like he also said, I want to hit on this point, what he said about how officers don't have that peer-to-peer leadership. They're in competition. So when I had my young captain, my first time as a first sergeant, he was always like, why the fuck does ACO keep getting the DO? You know, and I was like, well, he's like, because we're better than him. I'm like, we are. I was like, we have better PT scores. We have more Rangers. We have more leadership. Like we are. He said, well, what's the problem? I go, you're not politicking the right way to the battalion commander. And I was like, and plus the ACO's company commander is senior to you. You know, he's about like 6 months or I think like half a peer group ahead of you. Right. So it's like, you have to be able to go in there and talk to them to get your boys to fight that they want, the fight that they're working for. And I was like, the only reason that you're still in the running is because when the plans come to you, and like JC said, is, you know, maybe I'm getting it wrong. That non-commissioned officer, E6 and above, and has to be able, the E6 is to tell the lieutenant that he's fucked up, and not just, hey, you're fucked up because you're lieutenant. No, here's where you're doctrinally fucked up. Here's where you're going to get your ass chewed up right here. Here's where you're going to cause my squad problems. You expect my squad to get from here to there in 6 minutes? You got something else coming, you know, like like whatever. Like that's what that young lieutenant needs. And one of the things I heard, JC, correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the things I heard, a colonel say, and I'm not going to say his name unless he gave me permission, but because he's still in. But what he said was, you know what the Army cares about lieutenants? I was like, because I asked him, I go, why do I got to mentor this lieutenant? Like, why do I have to? I'm going to, but why do I have to? Like, shouldn't he be like the leader, right? And he's like, well, no. He's like, said, let me tell you something, young Sarge. He's like, the Army's looking for the next Corps of Generals. Right. And that's like 20 out of like thousands. He's like, they don't give two shits if they wash out, 2,000 lieutenants in the process. So he's like, that's why we need you to do your job. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that's when I started thinking about this topic. So if what doesn't make sense to me is, what good does an NCO do when I read this list again at improving oral communication skills, military education, right? The future of the Army, character development. What good does that do the next crop of young officers? Because this is getting more and more like what I expect an officer to be like. Like, this is what JC, if that makes sense to you.
What if we just did something a little bit different? Instead of saying, and this is where I've always thought that the Army got it wrong, to be honest with you. What if instead of worrying about officers and NCOs and what we wanted, why don't we just say, this is what we want of warriors? Because you've got guys who are like Sergeant Major Hendricks, one of the smartest guys, tons of degrees, written books, like, guy's a stud. But you know what? He's also a warrior. Like, he's a badass, and I'll go to war with him, and I'll listen to what he tells me to do, because guy's smarter than me, right? I also need the guys. I had a Sergeant First Class Coke, who was my first platoon sergeant in the 82nd, come out of 1st Ranger Battalion. Again, I'm not sure he had more than a high school diploma, but that guy was 1,000 times smarter than me every single day, and a hell of a freaking warrior. Why don't we worry about what do we want, not from our NCOs, not from our officers, but what do we want our future warriors to be like? We don't want them to be stupid. Okay. I see what I agree with everything you're saying, but I also never agree with, well, I don't need an education. No, you do. Because I need you to be a smart warrior, not just a hard warrior. I need you to be smart. Right. And that's if I fell anywhere, it's because I wasn't smart. But what we want is, we want intelligent, thoughtful warriors, intelligent, thoughtful killers. That's what we need. Those are the people that make the right decision on the X. Those are the people that make the right decision mentoring the right people. They know when to cut bait on the wrong people. To say like, well, I want an NCO to be like this, an officer to be like this, or I want NCOs to be more like officers. Look, how about we want a professional warfighting force filled with warriors who are not dumbasses and who are not Poindexters. How about that?
Yeah, buddy's waiting.
You're supposed to drop your mic now.
Yeah.
No, thing though, and I agree, but I also agree that you also have to agree that the product coming into the Army is generally more educated than, say, the product that was coming into the Army in World War II.
I got stats for that, buddy. I actually looked up stats for exactly your point, but keep going.
The product that was coming into the Army in Vietnam, right? The products that were coming in were, World War II. Hell, 3/4 of them were illiterate. The ones that were coming into Vietnam, that's an overstatement, but there were a lot of illiterate guys coming into the Army. A lot of people that didn't know anything. Well, they didn't know anything education-wise, but they knew a lot of common sense-wise. They had a lot of street smarts. They had a lot of it. Why would we, I guess, put a huge price on book learning and education without putting the same price on common sense, tactical reasoning, and how reality works? Like, I have no problem with, hey, you got to go to an English class because you're going to write NCOERs, even though we write NCOERs. Like, people in my English classes right now don't understand that you're supposed to start everything with a past tense verb and quantify every sentence, but that's because they're stupid, not me. But
you are at the Harvard of the Southeast.
You have to be to articulate things in reports. You have to be able to I got it. I completely understand. But what I don't need is like, I don't have to have a rifleman that knows that, you know, why the Mona Lisa is an important art piece. I don't have to have a rifleman that, you know, that knows that weird history of freaking medieval freaking Bosnia. You know, I don't. You know, I had a guy at once with my 07 deployment. Got a brand new guy.
That is biker one?
Yeah. This guy was
doing salsa night?
60, or not 60 credits. He was like 6 or 7 credits from getting his doctorate in anthropology. He was a specialist because he had gone to so much college. We got into a truck in Kuwait because we got him right before we got to Kuwait. Got in a truck. I was like, hey, look, man, you're going to be the driver because you haven't been trained enough to be a gunner. You haven't been trained enough to get out of school. You're going to be a driver because I can control where you go, what you do, and everything. We'll be good. Get in the truck, go to do a live fire or the first run of a blank fire. And I get in the car, or I get in the Humvee. He gets in the driver's side. He looks at me. He goes, Sergeant, how do you start this truck? And I was like, oh, you know what? I got you, Carlson. Like, or my bad. I got you, dude.
Oh, Carlson. I know Carlson.
Yeah. You've never started a Humvee before. I got it. I jump out of the Humvee. I go over. I start it. Walk back over. Jump in the TC seat, and he goes, well, Sergeant, how do you make it go? Like, I was like, put it in gear. Hit the fucking gas, bro. He didn't know how to drive all that education, couldn't drive a fucking car.
Right. And I always explain to people, I go, when they talk about military driver's license, I was like, during the surge and stuff like that, you know what your military driver's license was? Is you had a uniform on. Like, motherfucker, get in that vehicle and let's go. But no, I actually had stats for that because that's another thing that I see. And you know, I kind of was hoping the conversation would go this way. Don't call me Dr. Dre, the maestro, but like, you know,
I'm about to lose you.
I know. Here we go.
Jump off. Hey, it was a good conversation though. I'd love to.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Keep it going.
Yeah,
sorry guys.
JC and I will keep it
good
going because we got your input.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Have fun at the Predators game. I hope they lose by 2 goals.
Hey, Nashville ain't gonna do itself, guys.
Yeah, I would. To be fair, buddy, I wouldn't have turned down Nashville Predator tickets either. I would have. I might have called my friends and said, "Hey, can we reschedule for next week? Because I'm going to a Predators game."
It might have,
but probably what I would have done. But you know, that's just the maybe the education in me. So, all right, buddy. No, JC, we'll keep it going if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So like I was trying to say is you know, the conversation always it turns into that NCO business, officer business, and like you right away you caught it and you were like, well, why don't we just make it warrior business? Like what do we want our warriors to do? And I used that actually a couple times when I was talking to some of the higher ranking people in my time when I was having this discussion, when they were nice enough to listen to me. Was why does the Army have to be so big? You know, there's always this thing of like, we have to retain all these people. What for what? You know, like you talk about the burden on the command with X amount of people who are not deployable, you know, and this is more for like, you know, the force comm units and stuff like that, to where it's like, man, you really got like 15% of your guys are on profile. Like, then that hurts, you know, it's like, and then you got red cycle taskings and yada, 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 yada. And I was like, so then you always see like WTF, which has become real liberal Army what the fuck moments. And it's like, why do I have to retain the guy that's upset about that? If there's somebody that's upset about that and he's not more concerned about killing and then being a good leader, then maybe I don't need a guy who's triggered about that. You know, like maybe he doesn't have to stay in, you know, and we don't have to kick him out, but it's like, hey, you did your 6 years, high five, you know, and it's like, Thank you so much. So, but I looked at some stats what Buddy was talking about, and I think this is one of the. I'm a system thinker guy, so I think there's 100 things wrong with the system. One of them is the literacy rate, like Buddy was talking about. So they say on average, like in 1870, 20% of the entire American population was illiterate.
Really?
Yes. And then so they say the Census Bureau and like the Board of Education Statistics and all that stuff. But then you got to go into the minorities, right? And then you got, of that, 80% of all African Americans in 1870 were illiterate. And obviously it gets better as time goes on because of the Jeffersonian education system, of teaching everybody to read. You didn't have to have a class, you didn't have to be born into it like in Europe, right? And again, people don't realize that 1870 isn't that long ago.
No.
We are still a very young country, and we've been educating people, educating everybody. We're the only country that brings in people from across the border, and we give them free education.
Free education.
And again, that's not a bad thing. Some people might say it is, but it's like why? If they're going to be in this country, might as well make them
They're going to be here. Let's educate them.
Let's educate them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's where I think we're starting to get backwards with the non-commissioned officer development, to where I think we're wasting our time with the education of them, because they're coming in more educated than ever before. And like Buddy said, he had a guy who was almost a PhD. And I need my NCOs to be doctrinally sound. And I noticed it when I told, I'll say his name, Colonel Dunmeyer, running ARTB. He was my battalion commander. And he asked me what was my most knowledgeable time in the military. When did you learn the most? And I said to him, I go, it was actually when I was an RI. Because when I was in Florida, I had three options. I could have been a strong ranger and went scuba, went Delta, right? Like a lot of guys do that out of Florida because there's nothing to do out there except run for miles and, in sand, and then dive and go in the ocean and all that kind of stuff. It's like you can become a giant shitbag because nobody's down there to watch you. You can do whatever you want. And I was like, or you could become a primary instructor. You could take the route of like a platoon sergeant for the RIs. And because I had jump master and pathfinder and all stuff already, I was like, I'm gonna go to the PI train, not knowing that was gonna boost me huge, because you almost were you were an S3 as a PI. So when all the platoons were out, you're the one that wrote the op order. You're the one that controlled the movements of all these pieces on the battlefield. So when I became a first sergeant, I was like, wait a minute, this all makes sense to me. Like I know what my company commander has to do to look good. Like I know it. Like I literally just taught it for a year and a half. I was 3 years as an RI, but like a year and a half as a PI. And it was like, if I never went to Ranger school, if I never got into that pipeline and met those people, I never would have had that opportunity. And I would have been the first sergeant. And I'm talking force comm units, that sit there and they don't have the slightest idea what echelons of fire mean. They don't have the slightest idea of, what's your time distance analysis? Like how are we getting like at that level, at a company level, to where they should be at to do that? So this is where I get in. I guess I can turn it into a question for you, because you had your experience as an officer. It's like, did you ever look at a plan and just realize that there were so many failures on so many levels, and it was like, who signed off on this?
Yeah. So, it goes back to my point is, I can tell you that I know a bunch of officers that don't know time distance analysis and don't understand echelons of fire and don't understand, how you isolate a target. They don't understand the things that they should know. Now they have the rank and they have the degree and they have an experience.
PT score.
They have an experience.
Yeah.
But the older I get, the more I'm convinced that the degree, the education means very little to me, and your ability to solve unknown problems is what matters the most to me. your ability to communicate with others, your ability to be resilient, your ability to talk to people that think differently than you. Those are the things that matter more and more to me as I get older. And I get frustrated because the civilian world is certainly a degree centric world, right? Like everybody I know has got an MBA. I've got no desire to go get an MBA. Not because I don't think it's valuable, but because I don't like that's just not what I'm interested in right now. And you know, I think we've so I love the idea. There was a lot of, you know, Millie got a lot of crap about the books that he was allowing people to read. I think they should read all of it, but they should talk about it. Like I want NCOs, enlisted officers to read all different kinds of books. I want them to think about, you know, I want them to be like, hey, what did we think we should have done with Afghanistan? Hey, what do we think we should do? What would you do if you were in the Ukraine? What, like, we ought to be thinking about that stuff more than we're thinking about, hey, what's the degree that so-and-so got? Or now look, if you want to, if you're an NCO and you're a good NCO and yes, you also want to get a degree, totally support that. And I used to bring, like for drill sergeants, I'd bring classes into my, you know, I'd say, okay, we're going to offer these 3 classes in the battalion. And I would bring them to the battalion so that they could do education, because you work hard, you deserve the education if that's what you want. But to make that a prerequisite for being a warrior, I don't know that I don't know that tells me anything. It's kind of like JC, you couldn't lead a company unless you have an MBA. I think I'd fight that.
Yeah. And so one of the things that, you know, got me triggered, right? So one of the things that got me triggered, and I almost became a pansy in the meeting, but it was close. You know, we were doing some EO training, and great NCO teaching it, took a lot of pride in his job, and that's hard to do unless you really want it. You know, took a lot of pride in his job and was getting after it. And we've talked about this on the show a bunch of times about how squared away combat arms units. Yeah, there is some problems with racism and sexism, but not a lot. Like, we don't got time for it, right? And we square it right away, like that, you know. And again, people don't understand the price that we pay for, that we play for. Like no, I'm cool. I'm glad you're from North Carolina and you hate those kind of people, but like, I've got time for you, homie. Like, sorry, gotta go. Because those 2 guys over there you don't like are fucking heroes and warriors. Like, we're gonna go. Like, not sorry, whatever. They don't get that. But he brought up a point which I know wasn't his point. Was he's supposed to teach, and he was talking about how we need to get more non-combat arms leaders in higher positions in the military. And this is where I want somebody. This is what triggered the common sense bell in my head, right? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Now, maybe somebody from, you know, NCO PDD can come on and explain this to me, but like, if our job is to, you know, either win wars, provide humanitarian support around the globe, all right, and which first you need security, right, to be able to do that. Nobody just sends a bunch of freaking doctors somewhere in some country without establishing, you know, a footprint, you know, and establishing the lodgement, as the airborne guys would call it, right? Like, what bothered me is that's what's getting put down, is that, oh, we need to be more diverse in our leadership roles. No, not diversity. If you don't have the pedigree, like you said, like, you might have the degrees, but if you don't have the pedigree as a combat leader, somebody who can plan, execute, be resilient, be adaptable, right, and go through the whole process. And does that make me the best guy? No, I'm not the best that's ever done it, and I would be hard to find the guy that say he was.
Right.
But I made it my point to always read the doctrine of what my job was supposed to be. And I made it my point to, okay. And then when somebody would yell at me for something or try to correct me, I'm like, is this development, or was I supposed to do that? You know, like,
Yep.
and like, are you developing me? That's cool. Like, got it. That's awesome. Now, was I supposed to do that? Because I don't know if that was my lane. Like, I don't know if I was supposed to do that. I got you. So here's.
Well, wait, hold on. I want
Yeah.
to hit on that because I think it's a problem that we got in society, and you're seeing it in the military, right? We're looking for diversity's sake, not about qualification. So I do not. So I'm gonna, you know, I'm not. I hate all politicians. Let me caveat with I hate all politicians.
It behoove everybody to listen.
But here's the deal. I would vote for Nikki Haley in a freaking heartbeat. I would vote for Condoleezza Rice in a freaking heartbeat. Those two, but not because they're women, not because they're women of
One's
color,
black, yeah, well, yeah,
but
no.
because they're freaking squared away. And this whole idea of, well, I'm going to nominate a black female justice. Hey, you know what? How about you just nominate the best justice?
Right now, yeah.
Whatever they happen to be. I don't care. I want the best. And so when we look at it like that, I don't want non-combat arms combat. I want the best leaders and the best warriors in the best position to do great things. That's what I want. And you know what? I was the first guy when people were like, "Oh, I can't believe they're letting women in the regiment." Yeah, if a woman makes the standards, I don't like absolutely. Look, she's a ranger. Like I got no, I got people like I'm taking off my tab. Well, then you're an idiot because they earned it. And a good warrior is a good warrior, regardless of gender, regardless of color, regardless of beliefs. A good warrior is a good warrior, and we want them on the team.
See, and you see that because you were a combat leader. And again, I always try to tell people, civilians, that a combat guy, an infantryman, is probably the most diverse, most respectful, foul-speaking, like jerk on the planet. But if you were, is the minute that you said something stupid about, like, let's just say, I don't know, a Sikh or, you know, a black person, they're gonna be like, wait a minute. Why do you think that? You know, and now they're triggered, now they're pinged, right? It's like, because it's like, when have you ever fought with a black person? Have you ever fought with a gay guy? Like, have you ever like, you know, have you ever trained with one? Like, have you actually ever found out what a Seventh-day Adventist was? Like, I didn't know fucking idea what that was until I got in the Army. And all of a sudden, some guy in the barracks is Seventh-day Adventist. I'm like, what does that mean? You know, it's like, so, no, you hit it on the head with one of my solutions about, like you said, it's like, who's the best to do the job? Period. And with officers, I know it's slightly different, but not much. And it's like, if you were like a chemical officer and you're a captain, but for some reason you were PT stud, you went to Ranger school, and there's a point in time in your career where, you know, the right officer finds you, the right colonel, the chief of staff somewhere, you know, brings you up, you know, and it's just, it's a stroke of the pen, you know, and then you're somewhere else. Right. And so here's my solution, because we're getting towards the end of the hour, but like, my solution for NCO business and then the officer business, as we like, I will just might as well call it, like you said, is warrior business. One of my solutions, because there's, like I said, I believe that there's lots of problems and there's also lots of great things too. I don't want to not say that, but my solution is the track program, to where you become an E5 based on your ability to not get a DUI, right? Like, just show up on time, be in good shape, right? You know, learn 2 or 3 weapon systems. You know, if you're a non-combat MOS, you know, you learn how to manage the timeline for putting people on shifts at this certain time. Like, whatever, you're an E5. Mm-hmm. You're a manager. Okay.
I was just going to say that you're a manager. You're not a leader yet.
Yeah. And we love to say that our E5s are leaders. But there's a point in time, and I always said this, I go, a team leader in the infantry is the hardest job in the infantry if you're doing your job. Right. Because now you're managing and leading.
Exactly.
And it gets tough, you know, and the the light at the end of the tunnel is that staff sergeant. You know, it's like, get to that staff sergeant, and then I can go sit in the office with the platoon sergeant. The team leaders are doing this shit and help the PL. But no, like, so here's my with the how educated our society is. When people come into the military, right, after they make E5, they have a year to decide whether or not they're going to stay in the Army. Like, and then that's it, right? Once they sign, yes, I want to stay in the Army. Okay, now you go to a board to where your NCOs say, nah, this motherfucker's smart. This guy, let's get this kid into like officer candidate school. Like, or this dude's a warfighter and you know, can't spell simple words. Like, let's work with him a little bit on that, but this dude's going to be a first sergeant someday. Like, and so right away at that point in time, you go to Ranger school, right? And it's like, now you have that education for there. And it's like, if you want to make E6, you have to be technically and tactically sound. Period. Otherwise, why do we need you? Like, we got into that whole promotion system of just because you have the time in.
No.
You know,
and I think it should be technically and tactically sound, and you should be able to lead. Right now I'm looking at how are you developing your people, because you and I both know that there were officers and NCOs who were not leaders. They were absolutely the worst possible thing for their organizations, and they treated soldiers like training aids.
Yeah, but then the bigger we get, the more shit as we're gonna get.
Yeah. So I think that E6, I think you've got a really good answer here. And you know what I always struggled with though is I was lucky. I had one really bad commander. Like the worst.
Like battalion, brigade, higher.
He was
higher up
when I was at battalion level.
Okay, yeah.
He was honestly the worst human being you could ever imagine. I always had good bosses, and I always had great NCOs. I mean, I just had them, and whether they were in my formation or they were above me and taught me how to do stuff and said like, hey, don't talk to the boss like that. You got to go tell him this or whatever. I mean, and it's funny because even to this day, like I have friends who were senior officers that I talk to, but you know, I talk to more. I talk to the NCOs who were over. I talk to the Sergeant Major Halls. I talk to the Troxels. I talk to those guys probably more. The Grecas, the Chris Grecas. I mean, yep. I was just really lucky. I was just really, really lucky. So
see, I wouldn't say that you're lucky, because, and this is why I was trying to explain to that EO teacher when I was like, no, look, man, combat arms, when you get to a certain level, like you're now surrounding yourself, because we weed ourselves. We try our hardest to weed ourselves out because we're playing for different stakes. So it's like, I don't want that guy here. That guy needs to go. He's bad. Like, I don't care what anybody else says, like about his PT score or whatever. Like, no, that dude's a bad human being. And it's only a matter of time before he fucks all of us. Right. And then if we deploy, you know, because now, and again, we say on the show, is like the best friends that you have is the one that tells you the truth. And when somebody comes to me and says, Nick, man, you were wrong there, you know, and I'm like, was that really? Like, yeah. And you know, then you go to that soldier and be like, hey bro, like apparently I fucked up. And I was like, let's chat this out a little bit, you know, like, but whatever, you know, like whatever it has to be. But it's accountability, something that, you know, America doesn't like, no, the whole world doesn't like. Nobody likes when somebody holds you accountable. right? And it's like, but so I wouldn't say you were lucky, because even like in my career, I had one bad battalion level or higher command team to where like their character showed. And what I always explain to younger soldiers is before you trash the commanders or the platoon sergeants, like, and above, like all the way up, I go, understand that the brigade commander's not really thinking about you, like your squad, right? Like he's not supposed to, like, at all, right? You're like, if the mission comes down where 2 companies of losses is acceptable, what does that make you? That makes you an acceptable loss. All right. Like, I'm like, so don't expect him to give 2 shits what you're doing on a Thursday afternoon. Right. He doesn't care. Right. And I think we're looking too deep into it now. As far as like, what is an officer's job? What is a non-commissioned? It's a warrior's job.
Warrior's job.
Right. And I think I'll say his name because he's a cool guy. Sergeant Major Hester. He's the force, he's the Futures Command Sergeant Major. And he said something at NCO PD. He was like, just give me 3 hours a day. Give me 3 hours a day where you train your guys. And he's like, and that's all I care. Like, I want 3 hours a day where they touch their weapon. They learn something new, and an hour of it's PT. So you're good there, and it's like 2 hours of just do military shit.
That's
right.
Awesome.
Like,
That's
and
awesome.
it's like, it kept it simple, and it was like, yeah. And then he's like, have your whiteboard up, because guess what a whiteboard can fix? It can fix white space. So it's like, when you don't know what to do, here's the 4 things this month you're going to work on. Right. And like, so if you got nothing to do,
That sounds like a stud.
right. And it's real simple.
Yeah.
And you're educated. Like I said, this is why education matters. Because as I'm going through my final stages of my master's in leadership, as I read these books, I'm like, this is not groundbreaking.
Nope.
I'm like, I've been doing this for years.
Yep.
Like you said, so I have the experience, but now I can at least, say I can quote 6 authors that agree with me.
And somebody with a degree goes, yep, you're good.
Yeah. And so again, I think there's a point at where there's other armies that do this, but like, you're a career soldier or you're going to become a tactician. You're going to become, somebody who's looking up and out. But where we're at right now, if we're, in my opinion, and I need somebody to come on and talk about this as well, is, are we building our combat arms guys so when they reach the first sergeant level, can they look at a plan that the company commander and lieutenants have put together? And hopefully he was involved well before the freaking plan's finished, because that's usually what makes it better, but that's neither here or there. But can he look at it and say, yep, like, that's good. Like, you can take that to the colonel. You won't get your head chewed up.
Yeah.
And it's like, I know for a fact that I had a lot of good Ranger buddies that I was first sergeants with. Majority of them were RIs, regiment guys. And then there was the onesies and twosies that it's like, you really don't know what's going on, do you? And like, but it's like, and again, it's like, now like you said earlier in the show about we lead each other. It's like, now we're picking up their slack. Yeah. And it's like, hey, go over to BCO and make sure that these guys are doing that, because we can't be bogged down if BCO is bogged down, and yada, 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 yada. Hey, let's trade out 2 squad leaders, take these 2 guys, like, boom, Yep. It is what it is. And, but yeah, it's a great conversation, JC. Like I said, my solution, like I said, would be a track program with the education level that we have now. But what I see as a first sergeant is the pinnacle. Sergeant major is great, but you make it to first sergeant, like, I think you made it, like, in the enlisted side. Like, that's the last real fighting job that you're in, and it's like, here I am. Can I, you don't have to know every weapon system because of the NCO program and like the your KD time, and then you have to go be a recruiter or a drill sergeant. You got to go be an RI, and then you come back and there's 30 new weapons in your arsenal that you've never seen before. Like just we got some time. I'm not bogging you down, but the TT Lodak and the plot CR, the fires planning.
Okay, yeah.
So we didn't know any of that changed as RIs.
Really?
Like, how is that possible? How like, so as we're doing the planning process, you got a couple of these young officers snickering a little bit, and it's like, what's so fucking funny? It's like, we don't do that shit anymore. Like, it's like, what do you mean? And it's like, well, shit. He's like, I want like, and now I'm thinking like, how many guys got no-goes like 2 classes ago for, and it's like son of a, like, what, where's that gap? How does that happen? So it's like, we fix it. We do what we got to do. And now all of a sudden, but like I said, that's the gap where you come back, where I lose an NCO to NCOES for 6 weeks. It actually hurts us sometimes. Because that E6 comes back and he can cite sources like a boss. But
he missed some stuff.
And then like, what? Does he know the distance of a javelin? Does he know, like, does he actually understand, like, after the last 120 drops, the 80 ones have already been prepped and they're already firing? Does he understand this stuff? Like that's what I need that dude to understand. And I like I said, again, I'm bitching about it, but my solution is to program these guys to where this guy or girl is going to go be an officer. All right. This guy or girl is going to stay enlisted. Right. And then it goes along the same path as those people that say, like, why can't a guy be a 8-year machine gunner? If I just want to be a machine gunner for 8 years and get out, like, I don't want to make it past E5. Make me a corporal. Like, I just want to pull the trigger. Right. Like, why does the Army have to be so big? Like, I get the politics reason wise, but like, so I need somebody to come on and explain to JC and I, and if Buddy's probably at the hockey game drunk, I need somebody to come on and explain to me that NCO 2020 program and how that is making us more lethal warriors. And I want somebody to come explain it to me, not in the political sense of because we care. Like, we all care, right? Like the real leaders care. And when I sit in front of a first sergeant board, well, I'm a first sergeant with a promotion board, and I say, what does it mean to take care of a soldier? It's my first question to every guy. What does it mean to take care of a soldier? And what do you think their answers are? What do you think the most common answers are?
I don't know. Okay, now it would be like making sure that they get home on time, they have predictability in their schedule, they have family time, right?
Finances. Right. And I go, okay, so all right, I go, where in the first 3 years of your training have you gotten are you a financial advisor? No, none, first sergeant. Okay, so we can scrap out the finance part. Where in your 3 years of training, there's a guy going for E5, or whatever.
Right.
Where in your first 3 years in the Army were you a social worker? All right, so you really don't know how to fix their family life, do you? Like, do you have any fucking idea? No. How about you train them how to fucking win a war? How about you train them to where we go fight, and the best chance that they have coming home is that they're the most trained motherfucker on the planet. Like, and guess what? That encompasses taking care of them. Because if you break the dude, he can't train. If you got the guy all stressed out, he can't train. If the guy's in financial problems, he can't train. Right. So it's like all those things are nested in there. And it's like, but your answer should be like, I'm going to make that dude the most lethal motherfucker on the planet.
Training to be the only way to train somebody to be a warrior is holistic training. It's the only way. People think that training to be a warrior is like, it's myopic, and it's not. The only way to actually train somebody to be an elite warrior is to holistically train them in mind, body, and soul, and every aspect of their life. Because, and look, we get it wrong a lot. Like we have a lot of good warriors who got some other part wrong.
Yep.
But we know that we're trying, but that's sometimes they get it so wrong, they can't be a warrior anymore. That's how important it is.
Right.
So important that we're like, look, to be a good warrior, you got to be good at all of it, right? You got to be a good dad. You got to be a good husband. You got to be a good friend. You got to be like, it all matters. It all matters. But it's got to start with the idea. And this is something that I complained. It was since before the Army of One ads. When did we stop focusing on the warrior part of this? Like now, I guess the Army thing is be a warrior, but you can be like a cyber warrior, which is fine, whatever. But my point is, let's focus on being a warrior first. Let's focus on getting them to know that they're going to close with and destroy the enemy. That's their number one task. And to do that, all these other things have to fall into place so that you can do this really special thing, which we kind of are making less special now.
No, let's end it on that. And so I implore you, Nickel Co., you know who I am. So if you want to come on and chat about how are we doing that holistically, and if you give me the H2F stuff, I got something else for you because I read that as soon as it came out. But we will see you guys next month and with the fifth principle patrolling. So again, what is NCO or officer business, or is it warrior business?